let's get a few additional vocabulary words for angles. We have what's called a supplementary angle, and that's where the two angles will add to 180 degrees. Supplementary angles would have either two right angles, one acute and one obtuse angles, but you would never be able to create supplementary angles with two acute angles or two obtuse angles because there'd be no way to add up to 180. Sometimes you'll see these angles on a straight line like that, and those would also be supplementary angles. Now, complementary angles, on the other hand, are two angles that have measures that add to 90 degrees. And these angles necessarily have to be acute angles, and together they're going to combine to be a right angle. Now let's look at what happens when we have parallel lines. So when we're talking about these types of angles corresponding alternate interior and alternate exterior, we're looking at what happens when you have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. That transversal is that line that is going through the parallel lines. So your corresponding angles are going to be equal, and they will be located in the same position if you consider the transversal in each line. So for example, if I have parallel lines and I'm going to number all of these angles that are formed, you'll see that there are 8 angles formed with the parallel lines and the transversal. Your corresponding angles would be angle 1 and angle 5, because those are in that top left position. Angle 2 and angle 6 would also be corresponding because they're in the top right position. Angle 4 and angle 8 would be corresponding, and angle 3 and angle 7 would be corresponding. So these are equal angles formed by cutting parallel lines by a transversal, and they're in corresponding locations. When we discuss the alternate interior angles, we're still talking about angles formed by parallel lines cut by a transversal, but the alternate interior angles are going to be between the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So what that will look like is if we have these same angles labeled, angles 4 and 6 would be alternate interior because they are inside the parallel lines but on opposite sides of the transversal. And then 5 and 3 will be alternate interior. So the formal definition here, they will be equal, formed by parallel lines cut by a transversal, inside the parallel lines, but on opposite sides of the transversal. And then the last ones that we want to look at are the alternate exterior angles. These are also equal. They're formed by the parallel lines cut by a transversal, but these are going to be on the outside of the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So our same picture. This time, angles 1 and 7 will be alternate exterior. And then also angles 2 and 8. So here's our formal definition. We have equal angles formed by parallel line cut by a transversal. They are outside the parallel lines, but on opposite sides of the transversal.